whether it's a BMW or Mercedes or anybody. The market isn't there. I mean, just look at the figures we publish. Every month, production, year on year, is down an average of 35 to 40%. In some countries, it's over 50.
But you're talking about Toyota, and you're talking about Honda, and it's a lot of the really best cars being produced. Their sales are down massively as well.
Yes, and that means that no matter what they do to Chrysler, it is not going to work. And the same thing is true of General Motors. And they should have never been bailed out by the Bush administration 3 years ago. They should have been allowed to go bankrupt. And I know that is a terrible thing to say when the banks and Wall Street are being bailed out. But they shouldn't have been bailed out either. They should have been allowed under our system to go bankrupt. And that's what started this. I mean, they bailed out GE, AIG, which is a front for the CIA and money laundering. And every brokerage firm and bank in the country is involved in laundering money, particularly drug money. I mean, the whole thing is so corrupt. The only way we can solve this thing is put them all in jail.
But, of course, that's not going to happen. Of course, the thing that is going to happen is, since last October, when Henry Paulson said, I have to have $700 billion so I can bail out Main Street, so we can keep people in their homes, so we can buy up these home mortgages and keep people in their homes. That was last October. They still haven't done anything. I mean, and now, of course, some of the big banks, which had a moratorium on home foreclosures, have said, well, we thought Obama was going to do something. 100 days, nothing's happened. And they're going to start, a new wave of home foreclosures, and more people are going to lose their homes, and the home prices are going to fall here. But this is going to impact on all the rest of the world. And why aren't the major banks that have sold the fraudulent bonds, the fraudulent so-called collateralized debt obligations, why aren't they getting sold for selling fraudulent things? I do see that some people are trying to go after the rating companies, Moody and Standard & Poor, for giving AAA ratings to obviously fraudulent bonds. But the courts are saying, well, a rating is just an opinion, You can't criticize them for having the wrong opinion. And I could say, well, I think you ought to be able to criticize them because they knew they were fraudulent sales, and they were part and parcel of it. Sounds like they're going to get off scot-free, though.
Yeah, they will, and it's all prosecutable. It's all crime. It's all fraud, and there are no rules. They do what they want to do.
But
who was I read this morning? I forget what it was. It's in the next IF, but some attorney who does bankruptcy work, they told him to shut his mouth or they destroy his reputation. This is the administration. And it was on ABC. I picked it up. It's in the next issue. I mean, this is, these people are extortionists. They're worse than the mafia. Worse. And they kill people and get away with it. I mean, at least half the time they caught the mafia.
Well,
it's unbelievable.
Well, Chris, usually we know the mafia was working with the CIA, was carrying out a lot of the hits. Of course, if they got caught, they went to jail. But then, of course, just to show how unscrupulous things are, why the CIA actually killed the mafia don Sam Giancana. That was the story of Double Cross. I mean, this man who trusted the CIA because he was doing their assassinations for them all throughout the world, himself got assassinated, taken out by the Central Intelligence Agency. It's covered in a book called The Double Cross, written by Chuck Giancana, who is the brother of Sam Giancana. The book is still around. You ought to get it. You ought to read it. You ought to understand that nothing is as it appears to be. And they really do assassinate people who get out of line. And so,
that's for sure.
No, basically,
absolutely for sure.
No, do you think that there's going to be another big wave of foreclosures later this year? Home foreclosures?
I wrote about it in Saturday's issue, and this is the way it works out. By next month, almost all the Alta and subprime loans will be over with, the problems. Now we have option arms and prime loans. People are getting laid off.
And of course,
people on Wall Street and all throughout the country.
Now, by option arms, you mean those are the adjustable rate mortgages that people have that start out at 2.9% and then suddenly you're 6%.
Exactly. And so these are going to be weighing on the economy in 2010, 2011, all the way into 2012.
And of course,
there is not going to be any permanent recovery. There's going to be continued depreciation of assets, continued deflation as an underlying factor, and there will be continued increase in monetization, and that means turning money and credit into inflation is what it means. And the only thing that's going to change anything from inflation to deflation is once the U.S. forces have taken Pakistan, Israel will then attack Iran, and we will have a third world war. And under the cover of that, and a real swine flu manufactured at Army facilities at Fort Detrick will wipe out half the population of the United States.
Do you really think that's going to happen, Bob?
I think it's going to happen. I haven't heard anybody else say it, but that's what I believe. And, I was the one who called 9/11 in the November before it happened, within 33 days of the event. Didn't know what the event was going to be, but I knew there was going to be a false flag event because they needed to get into Iraq as a staging area, geopolitically and otherwise.
And because this was always the plan, only you had to read the Project for the New American Century documents, and they're included in our syllabus on Iraq, the Untold Story. You'll actually see the Project for the New American Century statement about rebuilding America's defenses, where they talk about how we're going to have troops permanently stationed in the Middle East, no matter who's in power, whether Saddam Hussein is in power or not. But they can't let the American people know that it was all fraudulent, that, of course, what happened on 9/11, well, certainly Building 7 was obviously a controlled demolition. I mean, when it came down, just look at the pictures of it. It's a typical controlled demolition as the center of the roof caves in first. Go to our website at radioliberty.com. And if they lie to us about what happened on September 11th, what else are they lying to us about? And certainly they can never let the truth come out that they killed 3,000 Americans, that there were something like 15 different military exercises that morning, many of them simulating a hijacking of American planes and crashing them into buildings, so that the NORAD and everybody else, nobody knew what was happening at that time. Well, Bob, you go right ahead. Certainly, I noticed in your last international forecast you talked about how you felt that we weren't going to get to the bottom of the housing market till about 2012. Is that right?
Right, and this is the way I think it works out. This is the way it looks from my perspective now. This is subject to change, no doubt, because I'm not in the inner sanctum. Now, the benefits from stimulus this year will hit this month and through July, and that'll be it. Maybe some trailing off into August. And so the economy, which looks like presently it's taking a rest from its hideous downward movement, it will probably be in that mode through the summer. And when the stimulus wears off, I would think that the stock market will go down and the economy will be subject to what it has been up until this point. Now, next year, most of the stimulus is taking effect. That's an election year. So between probably February, March, and through into October, I would think that the economy would again do relatively well. And I'll give you a grading system here in a minute. And irrespective of that, the market will not do that well. And the reason why is there's going to be some pretty bad inflation. Even cheerleader Warren Buffett agrees with that. Now, we had in the fourth quarter a minus 6.3 GDP. In the first quarter, minus 6.1. We should be probably minus 5 to 5.5 in this quarter. Maybe minus 4 through the end of the year. Next year, we should see somewhere between no negative and no growth and minus 4.